Guild Wars 2 offers a plethora of options when it comes to building your character for maximizing damage output. When crafting a damage build for PvE suitable for beginner players that just reached level 80, several key factors come into play. The speed of the build, which is often labeled as actions per minute or APM, and it measures the frequency of active inputs you have to make. Second, in Guild Wars 2, effective range. This measures the freedom of positioning that you have. Note that you would still want to stay close to your group for boons and healing, but it can improve DPS uptime in many situations either way. And the last criterion for difficulty I will label as complexity. This relates to skills that restrict your freedom of movement, the number of different skills that you use, and the number of bar swaps you have to do, because those create invisible cooldowns. Now, of course, the easiest build in the game doesn't help you if it doesn't deal any damage, so both burst damage and sustained damage are an important factor. Playing an open world adds survivability components to this, and the damage here depends on the self-coverage of offensive boons and vulnerability as well. To a certain degree, defense will also boost you, since higher defense facilitates rotation execution and DPS uptime as well. In essence, a beginner build should have a good amount of survivability in open world and a straightforward damage rotation, allowing you to focus on your surroundings. If you're looking at your skill bar the entire time trying to execute your rotation, it will be more difficult to actually learn the core game mechanics at the same time. Now, when we look back at the criteria that I listed before, those are actually pretty complex. In order to reduce the subjectivity in what constitutes an easy damage build, I made an Excel sheet that allows me to score builds based on personal weights for the criteria I listed. For that, I coded a script that extracts a lot of data from damage logs and converts that data into various outputs, including a visualized rotation similar to what the dps.report interface gives you. The difference is that you have a lot of builds, including their rotations and stats, in one source. There's a link to the sheet down below. You can toy around with it even without an Office account. It's publicly available. You can't break it by modifying it, since you get your own instance of the sheet every time. Since the desire for survivability in a build varies from person to person, I think it's best if I show you the general gearing options you have to build for that. I'll always start at the highest damage option. You can gradually increase survivability from there with the options I provide. First, we have to differentiate between power and condi builds, since they use different gear. For the standard gear prefixes used for damage, so berserkers, assassins or vipers, I'll redirect you to my wiki page on it. It shows all the options currently available, how to get cheap exotic pieces of them, and also has all the basics that you need to know for dealing damage. First and foremost, in open world, you want to start by covering important boons on yourself. Covering offensive boons, so might, fury, quickness and alacrity, paired with vulnerability on the enemy, can more than double your damage, while covering defensive boons like protection, resolution, stability and so on will net you more survivability than any reasonable gear set will give you. There are exceptions to this, but for most builds this holds true. That's why boon duration is an important factor in open world key, even more so than vitality, healing power or toughness, contrary to what many players seem to believe. On power builds, where power, precision and ferocity matter for damage, the most efficient options to reach more boon duration are twofold. For builds that have access critical chance, you can use diviner gear pieces. Exotic trinkets are cheap on the trading post and give you up to 40% boon duration without a larger damage trade-off. For builds that don't have access crit chance, using a cheap named berserker armor set, so Zeds, Sneakers, Devonas, paired with fireworks runes is the most efficient option. That is because the boon duration stats on the rune give more stats than power, precision or ferocity with the same number of runes worn. Now, if you feel like covering defensive boons better isn't enough for you, any piece of berserker can be replaced by knights 1-to-1. I don't really recommend marauder or demolisher, since they are more annoying to get and the additional benefit is low. Don't use celestial on a power build, it is bad. Condition builds have an easier time covering boons with a lower damage trade-off, since they only need condition damage and expertise as their main damage attributes. The main damage prefix you will find is Viper. Going for defense from there, the choices for boon duration and survivability are the following. The top contender for boon duration that can be used in instance content as well is Ritualist. This gives you vitality on top, which is a nice side effect. Any piece of Viper gear can be replaced with Ritualist 1-to-1. Ritualist armor in rare and trinkets are fairly cheap to get. The second option is Celestial, which is the best overall option for survivability in open world on condition builds. You lose damage compared to Ritualist on most builds, but you gain a substantial amount of survivability in return. This is not a prefix that you can use in instance content though. This is due to the tanking mechanic related to the toughness stat, but using a few impactful pieces like amulet, chest, weapons etc. in open world is absolutely great as a starting point. Note that there are some condition builds that partially use different gear prefixes like Virtuoso or Fire Camping Tempest or Catalyst, so I'd redirect you to the respective sections or guides to see how those can be adapted. Now let's get to the easy builds. I'll give you one build per profession with an open world variant and honorable mentions of other contenders. We'll start with the heavy armor builds, so Warrior, Guardian and Revenant. For Warrior, I recommend Power Spear Berserker. Power Berserker is usually a very fast-paced build with high APM, where being fast is essential for the damage output. But there is a way to change this while still retaining great damage and gaining a lot of range on top, using Spear and only Spear. Power Spear Berserker has around 50 APM, 800 range, uses only 7 skills and achieves excellent burst and sustained damage given how simple it is to play. Compared to the standard Axe DPS build, we're swapping out the trait line Discipline for Tact to benefit from the massive damage modifiers in there. Simply use all your skills aside from your signets on cooldown and win. It's that simple. In open world, this build is a moving powerhouse. When going for the quickness shared trait, as you should, you can actually provide quickness to allies around you, making it a good support option as well. With the defense trait line, it becomes very sturdy, and the constant access to stability allows you to ignore incoming CC effects quite frequently. When doing general roaming and group content, you can keep tactics and enjoy higher damage and incredible healing with allies around you, as every might stack you apply to yourself will be shared with allies and then heals you for each ally gaining a stack. This is insane. Like all power builds, it also has access to damage to healing conversion here, but you need Secrets of the Obscure for that. With the healing skill Blood Reckoning, you have a great uptime on damage to healing anyway, so you only need to survive the times in between casts of it. In terms of honorable mentions, there's a Power Arm Spellbreaker. This is a melee focused build that shares many of the same characteristics as Spear Berserker. It has low APM, high damage, great survivability. But I didn't choose it here as the default option because it has more forced movement skills and is mostly tied to melee range. For Guardian, I chose Condition Willbender. Condition Willbender, Camping Pistol and Torch is one of the highest return on investment builds in the game for beginner players. Through its focus on burning, it has excellent burst damage for a condition build, and Pistol and Torch bring a good amount of range with them. If you don't have access to Pistol on it, use Scepter instead. It has around 60 APM, over 700 effective range, uses only 9 skills in total and doesn't bar swap at all. Its main downside is that you need to go into melee range every 10-ish seconds for rushing Justice, your first virtue skill. But it's not that big of a deal if you have to delay it from time to time until you can safely use it, the damage will still be great. Other than that, just use the priority skills on cooldown and enjoy. In open world, the build can cover all important boons but quickness on itself easily with a good amount of boon duration from Ritualist or Celestial. It can share most of them in an area around it, so it is a good support option as well. Using Save Yourselves will cover over 50% uptime on most boons already, so you only need to close that gap to 100% on many of them. Making a few trait changes is enough to do so. Your main life insurance is your heal skill Litany of Wrath, which converts 33% of your damage into healing every 20 seconds. So it is mainly about surviving the time in between, which is pretty easy to do with the high health pools that come with Ritualist or Celestial gear. In terms of honorable mentions, there's one I have to mention here. It's the Power Hammer Dragon Hunter. This is a melee focused build that does most of its damage just from its auto attacks on hammer. It is very low APM since all you need to do for good damage is auto attacking and maintaining the Dragon Hunter relic. It also has access to range via longbow, and it is another fun build I definitely recommend checking out. On Revenant, you will eventually have to learn two things: managing your energy and swapping between legends to regain it. Power Vindicator with Alliance Stance though is a great beginner choice with excellent damage and is very easy to learn. You can just start by camping Alliance Stance and using a bunch of skills and your dodge on cooldown, and then get into using another legend on top when you're ready for it. This entry variant uses 6 skills, has around 40 APM and deals good enough damage to clear all content you might want to do. It doesn't have substantial range, but you can always put a hammer on the secondary bar and swap to that when you need it. Hammer deals a bit lower damage than dual swords, but more damage than standing at range doing nothing. For open world on this build, I recommend getting a set of cheap Berserker armor, so Devonas, with Fireworks runes. This way it becomes easier to maintain boons on yourself. Use Scavenger Burst to cover quickness and other boons on yourself and bounce your way to victory. It gets even more fun when using a Sigil of Stamina on a weapon, since you regain a full dodge on every kill. Via Roiling Mists, you have a native damage to healing conversion in the build, freeing up the relic slot for something else. Relic of Rivers is a native choice here since it gives you alacrity and regeneration on dodging. If you want more self-healing, use the Relic of Zakaras. If you have neither, start with the Relic of Evasion for easy vigor coverage or keep the damage relic on. I recommend using the legendary Dwarf Stance for starters, since it gives you healing, a condition cleanse, more CC and a bit of support on demand. You don't have to swap to it in most cases, but you can whenever things get iffy. In terms of honorable mentions, there's Conditioned Spear Renegade. Renegade is one of my all-time favorite specializations, and with Spear and the trait Song of the Mists, it is an incredibly strong choice with low APM and only 11 skills on the 2 legends. It has innate range with Spear and Shortbow and incredible solo damage too. Moving on to Thief, and here's a pretty clear choice: Power Pistol Deadeye. Power Pistol Deadeye is probably the most straightforward build in the game, since it only involves setting a dual wield skill on low to auto attack mode by control right clicking on it and then maintaining Deadeye's mark on the enemy. You can easily increase its damage by using a Deadeye relic and using a few cantrip skills to maintain it, because it will eventually bore you out otherwise. The quickness variant of it is a bit more engaging and has group utility, since you will need to use your stolen skills as well as circumvent the stealth mechanics that happens on casting them. To do that, just press unload after the stolen skill. Even when using a Deadeye relic, it has very low APM, innate range and consistent damage. One of its main downsides is that its burst damage is non-existent for a power build and it lacks cleave. In open world, you can just play the standard quickness variant of the build and slap on a few survivability traits and a Zakharos relic. Combined with invigorating precision, you heal for 10% of your damage while you have Fury up, which is incredibly strong. It is an excellent choice that maintains all offensive boons aside from Alacrity on itself and allies around it, but isn't very sturdy if you do take damage. Since your Deadeye's mark resets on killing something, it's also a great choice for general roaming and tagging mobs at high range. A very good alternative to this is Conditioned Spectre. Condi Spectre is a quite simple build with innate range and a lot of flexibility on its utility skills. It does involve casting more skills than Deadeye, but it can also provide Alacrity and other boons around it easily. Even though it sounds like a supporty kind of build, don't underestimate how much burst and sustained damage it can do for a Condi build. For Engineer, I chose Power Rifle Scrapper. I can already see you guys typing why not Power Mechanist in the comments, just wait a second. Power Scrapper is one of the tankiest options for a DPS build due to it converting damage into barrier at all times. You're running around with a constantly refreshing 50% additional HP, making it very easy for healers to keep you alive by hitting you underneath that shield. It will also provide close to permanent super speed to you and allies around, which is an incredible tool for many fights that involve a lot of. Even when not using kits and with rifle, you have great damage. Simply use all your skills on cooldown and win. In open world, Power Scrapper is one of the most fluid builds in the game. It provides area quickness and super speed and other boons, easily with just a few trait changes. It is an incredibly sturdy build. Just swap to the trait Short Fuse in Explosives to fully cover Fury, and the trait Kinetic Accelerators in Scrapper for area might and quickness. Your Blast, Leap and Whirl finishers will keep quickness up just like that, you don't even really need to think about it. If you want to be extra sturdy, you can slot a Relic of Zakharos for extra healing. You can also cover protection on yourself with a reasonable damage loss by using Expert Examination in Scrapper. The honorable mentions here are Power Rifle Mechanist and Condi Mechanist. Rifle Mechanist is every raider's greatest nightmare, because there was a time it was so oppressive in perks that every instance was crowded with green metal cans that blocked your view on anything smaller than a Norn. But it was just buffed back to a quite strong level of damage, so it became a good option again. Very high innate range, only technically though, low APM, uses few skills actively and actually has decent burst damage. It can also be adjusted to provide Alacrity and other boons to allies, making it a good support option. I chose Scrapper over this due to the great amount of utility and survivability that Scrapper brings, while retaining the same damage potential and a simple enough rotation. Now, Condi Mechanist is just as straightforward and strong as Power Mechanist or Power Scrapper. It's just a much slower build for damage than any Power Engineer build, which is why I didn't choose it here. On Ranger, I recommend starting with Power Soul Beast. Power Soul Beast is one of those builds that will basically never perform bad. It has excellent burst damage, a very simple rotation, and is a great entry to learning burst combos in this game. By staying merged with a pet and using Sikkim, it involves using as many damage skills inside the 10-second window of that. In this variant, I don't use any sword skills aside from auto attacks. The other two sword skills are leap skills, so you might yeet yourself into danger when using them at the wrong time. On the secondary bar, I recommend dual axes. They give you range whenever you might need it and are a great option for a weapon set. You can also camp dual axes to deal around 35k DPS with a similar rotation concept to Sword and Axe, which is pretty great too. In any case, the APM of this build is very low, and once you get the burst combo down, you will deal an excellent amount of damage given how simple it is. In open world, Power Soul Beast is an excellent choice. It is very durable, has incredible burst damage, and with a few adjustments to utility skills and a bit of boon duration from Diviner Trinkets, it can provide itself with all important boons aside from Alacrity. Slap on a Relic of Zakharos and you'll be blasting your way through open world. The trait Essence of Speed paired with We Heal as 1 as a healing skill and a few sources of quickness will keep extending the boons you apply to yourself, and the skill Moa Stance increases your boon duration by 66% while it is active. You can also share stance effects around you, making it a good support option, even though it doesn't share quickness or alacrity. Getting dual maces for Power Ranger builds is an absolute game changer, since they combine good enough damage with incredible survivability and CC. Now, especially for open world, you cannot get around Power Untamed. Power Untamed plays similarly to Power Soul Beast and is one of the most broken builds in the game for solo gameplay. It can provide itself with all boons aside from alacrity easily, even without adjusting gear, and will share quickness in an area around it as well. I didn't choose it here because it is a bit more difficult to play than Soul Beast, but you won't go wrong with picking it if you like a more traditional pet and ranger playstyle. Another option you can choose is Condition Druid. Condy Druid has a very fast-paced benchmark rotation but can be simplified by using Shortbow to be a good beginner choice. It has init range, a fairly fast ramp up for a Condy build, and is probably the closest you can get to a typical ranger with a bow archetype. If anyone ever tells you Elementalist is a difficult profession for beginners, they have no idea what they're talking about. Tempest, Catalyst and even Core Elementalist can be made very simple to play and survivable in open world, and all that with low APM, high range and decent enough burst damage. In this build variant for Tempest, all we're doing is camping Fire Attunement on Scepter and Focus and pressing all skills on your bar on cooldown. Given the simplicity, the damage of this build and instance content is excellent, and since there's only one skill on your bar that is melee, your Fire Overload, it further has great damage uptime. Its main downside is that there's close to no CC damage in Fire Attunement, so that applying it involves swapping to Water and Air Attunement once and going back to Fire as soon as possible. All we need to do to make this build very survivable is to make a few trait changes. I use a variant that just about keeps full health with a moderate damage area. To facilitate boon coverage and increase survivability further, you can also include pieces of Ritualist or Celestial gear, and the more of them you include, the easier in open world it will become. You have 3 basic choices how to play this. Number 1, Camp Fire Attunement. This is equivalent to the simple DPS build I explained before. Make sure to change to Elemental Shielding and Earth to cover protection on yourself, as well as Elemental Bastion for easy passive healing. You can also use Invigorating Torrents for easy vigor and regeneration coverage. Number 2 is Camping Earth Attunement. This is an I don't care about anything approach that maintains protection, resistance, a lot of stability and barrier on itself. It's ridiculous how tanky this can become while maintaining decent solo damage at the same time. When going for this, use a Warhorn instead of a focus on the offhand because it is much better for damage and Earth Attunement. Having protection, stability and resistance on yourself permanently allows you to ignore a lot of incoming attacks, CC and non-damaging conditions. Playstyle number 3 is the full DPS and alacrity variant with a Warhorn. This is great to get used to simple and slow attunement swapping. Here we will alternate between Fire and Earth Attunement to cover a lot more boons. Change to Lucid Singularity in Tempest and watch yourself cover Might, Vigor, Regeneration, Fury, Protection and Alacrity. You'll also share all of these boons in an area. In all variants, your main sources of survivability are the passive healing from Signet of Restoration and Elemental Bastion. Elemental Bastion triggers every time you apply an aura to yourself and allies, making it a strong passive source of healing. You also have your Elite Elemental, which can tank some damage, especially if you use the Earth variant. If you want a fully ranged alternative, you can play Condition Fire Catalyst. Fire Catalyst is a very similar build to Fire Tempest, since all you do is camp Fire Attunement on Scepter and Focus and press skills on cooldown. Catalyst gives you another boost to range at the cost of survivability. You can do the same 3 steps for Catalyst as for Tempest with Fire and Earth Attunement with very similar results. Catalyst also allows you to apply quickness to allies, which is a great side effect. When it comes to beginner builds, Necromancer has a lot to offer. All 3 specs are great beginner choices, but Scourge made the race here. I chose it because of its forgiving nature and capability to provide support around it. It has init range on all its skills due to its shape mechanic, and the only thing you really need to care about is transferring the conditions from Blood's Power with your Shroud via Plague Sending. And that's pretty easy to do by always pairing the 2 skills. This build has fairly low APM and uses only 10 skills, and it does not have any forced movement. When camping Pistol and Torch, it doesn't even involve weapon swapping and still does great damage. If you don't have access to weapon mastery, just use a Scepter instead of a pistol. It will be a little worse in damage and life force management, but fine for starters anyway. Like all Necromancer specs, Scourge is a beast in open world that can easily solo anything in the game with the right build. With a few trait changes and some boon duration gear, it can cover all important boons but quickness on itself, natively maintains full vulnerability and all that while applying tons of barrier to itself and allies. With Abrasive Grit, it will also cover Might and cleanse conditions off very frequently. Provides full alacrity around it, meaning that you'll have a great support spec at the same time. Aside from all the barrier, your main source of healing is the trait Parasitic Contagion, which heals you for 5% of your condition damage. In terms of beginner builds, you can't get around Power Reaper. Power Reaper is everyone's favorite child, and you can find a plethora of lower intensity builds for it on many channels and build websites. It certainly is a very good beginner build for instance content with low APM. It's also a very strong for open world due to its self-sustainability, high cleave damage and easy boom coverage. But the drawback of easier Reaper rotations is that they spend a lot of time in Reaper's Shroud. Reaper's Shroud shields your health from incoming damage, but incoming damage will strongly disrupt your rotation. Especially if you don't know mechanics in group content, it can happen quite frequently that a big damage hit will push you out of Shroud very early, drastically reducing your damage. Harbinger and Scourge don't have this problem because their Shrouds don't shield you. Especially in instance content when you don't know what's going on, Scourge and Harbinger are the better beginner choices. Last but not least for Mesmer, I was torn between Power Chronomancer and Condi Virtuoso. When you look at the most popular elite specializations of all time in Guild Wars 2 Wingman records, Virtuoso is among the top contenders despite only existing for half of the time. It's safe to say that a large portion of that popularity came from Condition Virtuoso. By design, it is a very simple Mesmer spec that exchanges your clone decoys for a straightforward ammunition mechanic. The popularity from Condi Virtuoso comes from its fairly low APM even in the benchmark rotation, and it is one of the very few builds in the game that gets close to no punishment for staying at full range. This makes it a great choice for high DPS uptime in the actual encounters. It doesn't have any movement restrictions either. The variant I propose here uses Chaos while camping Dagger and Torch, making the build very simple to play. Using Chaos has the advantage of covering and sharing a lot of boons around you and maintaining a really good uptime on stability via shatter skills, making it a very beginner-friendly option. There are two things to pay attention to: using Signet of Illusions when both Shatter 2 and 5 are on a longer cooldown, and combining Torch 4 and your heal skill for the Blast finisher inside the Ethereal field for additional uptime on Chaos Aura. In terms of difficulty, you can start with this variant and then move to the dueling variant including Sword and Focus once you feel ready for weapon swapping. It will increase your damage and isn't particularly difficult compared to other benchmark rotations. Compared to Power Chronomancer, Virtuoso has a harder time covering booms on itself, but there are some neat tricks you can use to cover all important booms. Swapping to Illusionary Defense in Chaos allows you to cover protection on yourself just by using Shatter skill 2 on cooldown. Using Signet of Illusions will allow you to extend all boons on yourself with just one button press. Quickness comes from three sources: Arcane Thievery as a utility skill, a Celerity Sigil on a weapon, and the trait Duelist's Reversal in Virtuoso. The Celerity Sigil can be covered by using Bladesong Dissonance on cooldown. It doesn't have to be with all blades stacked either. Duelist's Reversal is very powerful because it gives you the three most important boons whenever you block or dodge an attack: Regeneration, Fury and Quickness. Using Sword as the offhand comes with a short cooldown block, and your heal skill applies Aegis to you for another one. You will gain these boons when you dodge an attack as well, giving you plenty of sources for Duelist's Reversal to trigger. If you have it, you can also use a full Celestial set with Trapper runes on this build, which makes it more survivable. Usually swapping in a few pieces of Celestial for Viper and Rabbit for Sinister is enough to make it work though. The easiest alternative for Virtuoso is Power Chronomancer. Power Chronomancer is perceived as a pretty complex build due to the continuum split mechanic, but it can be simplified strongly while retaining pretty good damage. By using Dagger and Sword as the baseline and then adding an offhand focus on another bar when you're ready, you can gradually upgrade complexity before approaching the benchmark rotation. It has full range, low APM, great self boons, and is the only spec in the game that allows you to play all roles, including both a quickness and an alacrity provider. If you're looking for a jack of all trades choice, Chronomancer is the go-to specialization. While it doesn't have the greatest passive sustain, using Rifle with a Relic of Nuris and Phantasm spam works very well in open world, making it very survivable while retaining the range. There we have it, easy and strong beginner builds for all professions. Let me know in the comments how you like them. I hope you're intrigued to try some of them you haven't seen before. Feel free to like and subscribe for the YouTube algorithm. Happy adventuring, and may your damage numbers soar to new heights.